Welcome back to News Talk here on News Channel 8 and our conversation this Thursday with Northern Virginia Congressman Don Beyer. Let's open up the phone lines. If you have a question or comment for Congressman Beyer, we'd love to include you in the conversation today. Those of you watching live in the 11 a.m. hour can join the conversation, and we hope you will. Constituent or not, if you've got an important issue to put on the table, we'd love to have you be on the air. So 703-387-1020 is our number here. Grab an open line now, and we will go to the phones as your questions and comments come in. I'm amazed at one issue that has Congress log-jammed in a bottleneck. So many of the disagreements you can understand because they are sincerely held beliefs, or they're just the partisan, they believe this, so therefore we believe that. But on highway funding, to restore the crumbling roads and bridges that we see right over at Memorial Bridge, where they've had to take lanes away because maintenance has not been done. And we know that all over the country, projects not nearly as sexy as the Memorial Bridge, but just as important to the convenience and safety of regular people who are going to work and going to school. What's it going to take for Congress to come together and put real money into this crying need?
Bruce, it's one of my great frustrations. We just voted to kick the can down the road again right before we adjourned at the end of July. I voted no. So I think we just have to stop doing this. The last time we put any new money into the Highway Trust Fund was 1993. The gas tax is 18.4 cents a gallon. It hasn't been increased in all those years. We're now seeing gas prices on the way down under $2. This, I think, is the right time to do it. The dilemma, by the way, the numbers overall, $3 trillion in the infrastructure backlog in this country that we're not addressing. And just within the Park Service alone, it's $6.5 billion, which is why Memorial Bridge is so relevant. You know, we're down to 4 lanes there out of 6. The debate has been, where does the money come from? You know, I think the gas tax makes the most sense. There's a great sort of theory from Congressman Earl Blumenauer from Portland that the Post has been writing about, which recognizes that cars are much more fuel efficient. Mm-hmm. Many people are going to electric cars and to hybrids. So the gas tax may not be as reliable a source in the years to come. And we may need to do something around so-called vehicle miles traveled, VMT. But then that depends on how do you measure that.
So the need is there. I mean, we have crumbling roads and bridges. That's unquestioned, right? I mean, we have a significant backlog, and it gets worse every day. That's fair to say, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The money that you spend fixing roads and bridges is all done by private sector firms, right? This is not the government, the dreaded government, right? It's all private sector, right? It's all paving companies and concrete and all the rest, right? It's all and it's good for jobs. I mean, none of this isn't in question, right?
The smallest number you hear is a revitalization of that trust fund would put between 400,000 and 1.4 million people to work in America. This is a huge number. When given the unemployment is now 5.2%, that would drive it down into the high 4s. So really important. John Delaney, who's a congressman from suburban Maryland, Potomac, has a plan to repatriate American assets that are overseas that are subject to a 35% tax if they bring them back, to cut the tax rate down to 15 or 16 or something %, but have it invested in transportation infrastructure bonds. It's a great idea. I think Republicans and the White House are behind it. When we come back next week, we need to make one of these plans happen.
I mean, I can understand doing it one way or the other or hybrid or whatever, but for the life of me, and I know for folks at home it's the same, I don't get doing nothing. I honestly really am stumped.
And I think the Democratic and Republican leaders of the Transportation Committee at least agree that something has to be done. I go back to the Ben Franklin thing at the Constitutional Convention that when a carpenter puts 2 boards together, you've got to cut a little bit off of each one. And we need to just find something that everybody doesn't. It hurts a little bit, but it works for America.
Can you talk about the FAA authorization that's coming down?
Well, it again is due, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, is due by the end of this month. And, you know, with Dulles and National and BWI, this is very important for us to get this done. It's not as controversial because we're not looking for major new sources of funding, but there will be, you know, little battles in between.
Do your constituents ever ask about politics, about 2016, and I guess in particular whether the woman who still is the front runner in the chase for the Democratic presidential nomination, Hillary Clinton, how it is that she was Secretary of State but had her own email server? Does this ever come up in conversation? And do Do you find yourself wondering, how does the Secretary of State have her own email server?
I know. Apparently, she's the first Secretary of State ever to have an email account. So it's new ground and new territory. And I think we're learning little by little. But I just don't want it to get exaggerated. From what I read in the Post yesterday, there were something like 6 emails that were classified. All of them were classified after she had already left office. So she wasn't sending out things that said classified at the top, and most of them were sent to her rather than she sent out. So I'm hoping this will blow over pretty quickly.
Do you have a fear that this might be chipping away, given that this has been around, this controversy has lasted longer than a lot of people thought it would, and it probably isn't going to go away tomorrow. Is it having an effect on the public's perception of her in terms of honesty or forthrightness?
Well, I don't know what the public perception is. It unfortunately is part of the way what John Harris calls the freak show of presidential politics right now. If it wasn't this, they'd be attacking her on something else. In the meantime, you have the Trump show on the other side, which is fascinating for all of us.
We had a debate here yesterday on birthright citizenship. That issue has come seemingly from nowhere. The notion that we should reconsider what has been the practice, that if you're born on American soil, you're an American. Do you think we're headed for a debate, and what do you make of all this?
Well, if it's a debate, I hope it's a short one. I was just thinking my grandfather, Otto Beyer, and my grandmother, Clara Mortensen, were both, using Jeb Bush's terms, anchor babies. Their parents were immigrants from, from Denmark and from Estonia. So I think it would be a terrible thing to change the 14th Amendment. What other amendments are we going to then chase down? I think this has been part of the fabric of America for 150 to 170 years. We need to keep it just the way it is.
Does it surprise you that we're at this place?
It's discouraging, but the whole immigration reform debate is discouraging. We were at a sensible place a couple of years ago when George W. Bush, the Republican Senate, all had come together around recognizing that we have to do something about most of the 11 million people that are here without papers. They're an integral part of our workforce. 2/3 of our family business born overseas. We'd be lost without them. So let's find paths to citizenship. Let's find ways to take away the fear. Let's find ways to help them be constructive parts of our economy. We're getting old, and we're going to need this next generation of workers, because otherwise who's going to support us?
What's your broad expectation? I want to kind of end where we began. With Congress coming back, there's a long to-do list. A lot of the issues that could have been dealt with in the spring got kicked down the road. Are you looking at a productive fall? Does the heated nature of the primary, particularly on the Republican side, create an opportunity where, with fewer people watching your every move, maybe some deals can get cut and some progress can be made?
I'm actually optimistic. If you look back at the spring, we were able to get trade promotion authority for the president in a bipartisan way. We were able to get the so-called doc fix, which was this is how doctors are paid on Medicare. Right. That was kicked down the road year after year after year. We came together and fixed it. We had 2 cybersecurity bills passed. There was a lot of good things there, and I'm optimistic that we can do some good things in the fall.
We know we'll be talking with you again as lawmakers return and as you get into the fall session. Our Democrat Don Beyer represents Northern Virginia's 8th District in the U.S. House. Congressman Beyer, we appreciate your time.
Thank you, Bruce.
Good to see you as always. We'll see you again.
Thank you.
If you're wondering what Republican Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, who represents the 10th District, thinks about the issues that we've just been discussing with Congressman Beyer, well, so are we. We have invited her to do News Talk many times. No luck so far, but we'll continue to invite her as we strive to provide the best coverage of local politics that you will find anywhere. An update on the hour's top stories and the end of the week forecast. It's all coming straight ahead. And then D.C. Councilman Kenyon McDuffie weighs in on the public safety challenges now facing the district.